Story number 4, Whispers of the Eternal Cycle. The air hummed with a tension no peace should bear, its currents weaving secrets through the shadowed expanse, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I stood at the edge, the ground trembling with a scent I couldn't place. Earth, mist, something ancient, something that clung to my breath, something that knew my unease. The world stretched, its edges bending as if the earth was alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger to choice, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The hum deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like warnings, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the ground, but the shadows faded, the light dimming, the silence heavier. The space wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. I ventured deeper, the path stretching ahead, its surface bending as if the world was watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my chest, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine. It belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew I was here. The vibration intensified, the earth's pulse a drumbeat under my feet, its silence a predator. I carried my curiosity, a frail shield against the unknown, but the air disagreed, its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow at. The breeze sighed, the path a canvas of lives spent and lost, its edges holding echoes of those who'd walked here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to destiny, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. You have been given a chance, one single opportunity just for you. Little one, you don't have to endure the tribulations about to be unleashed. You can escape all of that misery. All you have to do is listen to my voice, as before it begins, the same. A faint hum vibrates from the sky that tickles the back of your throat. The resonance builds to a thunderous, resounding blast of one of the 7 celestial trumpets. Each time that horrible sound is heard, it has heralded the start of another 3 years of suffering, each more horrifying than the last. 4 times has the trumpet sung its song. Before the echo of the 5th trumpet fades, you will be given a chance to escape. When that familiar tickle re-emerges, an object will appear in the sky. As it nears, the intensity of the deep tone grows. You know, it is only a matter of time before the deafening blast is heard. Once more, however, this time what is to come will be different. The past 4 soundings of the trumpet brought with them disasters never seen in such magnitude. Yet you understand what they were. Yes, they were terrifying, but it was all within the realm of your understanding. You know what makes the earth roll and quake. You know why fiery mountains fall from the heavens. Knowledge has freed you from the archaic belief in the supernatural. No longer does such nonsense deceive you into believing The displeasure of a god will call the hurricane, or a curse will summon the cyclone, or a hex will bring down the plague upon you. It is something different that approaches from above. It is an abomination. It is one word the Hebrews called him Abaddon, the banished, and the Greek knew him as Aolian, the destroyer. Life as you knew it is now over, for he holds the keys to the bottomless pit that has imprisoned his army, since even before the words, "Let there be light," were spoken. Do you remember the first time we spoke? Little one, after the second trumpet sounded, you were given a vision of the pools of Nakarasera. If you were able to find the location of those, sacred waters go there now. The earth's pulse was a spark. Its whispers a truth that lingered in my chance, a truth that followed me to the path. The air shivered with a chill no warmth should defy, its currents weaving secrets through the shadowed expanse, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I stood at the crossing, the ground trembling with a scent I couldn't place. Earth, dampness, something ancient, something that clung to my breath, something that knew my resolve. The world stretched, its edges bending as if the earth was alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger to trial, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The chill deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like trials, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the stone, but the shadows faded, the light dimming, the silence heavier. The space wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. Cookie. I ventured deeper, the path stretching ahead, its surface bending as if the world was watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my chest, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine, it belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew I was here. The vibration intensified, the earth's pulse a drumbeat under my feet, its silence a predator. I carried my determination, a frail shield against the unknown, but the air disagreed, its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The breeze that the path a canvas of lives spent and lost, its edges holding echoes of those who'd walked here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to sacrifice, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. 3 pools sit at the end of a T-shaped rock formation as the moon peeks out from the horizon. Its crimson light gives the waters the appearance of blood. The higher it rises in the sky, long shadows are cast upon the rock. The likeness and resemblance of a man outstretched upon the rocks will appear before you. Stand in the center of the 3 pools. Tread carefully, for you stand before the image of the sacrament laid upon his symbol. Each pool has a name. The pierced left hand, the pierced right hand, the pierced foot. Before you prepare to receive the blessings of the pierced abdomen, it requires you to be anointed with the ethereal spearhead that will now run you through. There is no outward wound, but blood is now seeping internally into the empty places within you. Your body has now become the fourth pool of sacrifice. When you collapse from the pain, ensure that you fall into one of the pools of water. If you fall onto dry earth, you will have missed your only chance to enter the portal. And you will lose the atonement. As punishment, your wounds will be healed, but you will live the remainder of your days marked as was Cain, hunted by both angel and demon. If successful, you will awaken in a dark, candle-lit stone building lined with pews and ing. At a great altar, you stand upon the place of worship where the crossroads meet. Behind you are 3 mirrors, very similar in orientation to the pools of water you recently stood before. Shake off the chill from your wet body and make haste. Little one time moves differently here, and we must move quickly. Look to the altar. Do you see it there? In the shadows, a figure is kneeling in the distance. Slowly and cautiously approach it. The creature is tall and hooded. It should be deep in prayer, whispering strange incantations. If it is not, do not come any closer. Only approach if it is in prayer. Do not interrupt. Any disruption will be considered a great offense, resulting in a painful death. For you, kneel in front of it, bow your head, do not make eye contact, and wait. Be patient and make no mistake. It knows you are there. Once it has considered you and deemed you worthy, it will acknowledge your presence. However, if it decides you are not worthy, well, there isn't really much more that needs to be said. Now, is there? It will ask you, why have you come before me quickly? Tell it, I seek passage over the bridge. It will take its time before answering. You lack the knowledge to accomplish such a deed. Be brave, little one, once these words depart your lips. There is no turning back. The creature towers above you. I seek the knowledge of the forbidden. I wish to know what is the image of God. The earth's pulse was a weight. Its whispers a truth that lingered in my trial, a truth that followed me to the altar. The air crackled with a strain no mind should endure, its currents weaving secrets through the shadowed expanse, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I stood at the threshold, the ground trembling with a scent I couldn't place. Stone, dust, something ancient, something that clung to my breath, something that knew my fear. The world stretched, its edges bending as if the earth was alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger to peril, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The strain deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like secrets, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the stone, but the shadows faded, the light dimming, the silence heavier. The space wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. I ventured deeper, the path stretching ahead, its surface bending as if the world was watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my chest, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine, it belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew I was here. The vibration intensified, the earth's pulse a drum beat under my feet, its silence a predator. I carried my courage, a frail shield against the unknown, but the air disagreed. its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The breeze sighed, the path a canvas of lives spent and lost, its edges holding echoes of those who'd walked here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to knowledge, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. It will slowly lift its head, close your eyes, and shut them tight. You will hear its body creaking like breaking branches of a tree. It leans close, taking in your scent from the air. Its hands hover and encircle over you. The fingers glide in the air, following the shape and curves of your body, coming ever so close but never quite touching you. A deep, quivering exhale of breath escapes the creature's mouth, and it makes contact with your skin. It caresses your face with one hand as the other rises slowly to embrace your head from the nape of the neck. Its bony fingers envelop your entire head from behind, even with your eyes closed and its mouth unseen. You can tell it is pleased with what it holds. You can tell it is smiling. It will grab you by the wrist and lift you off the ground. The ferocity of its grip is both sensual and violent. You're helplessly dangled above the ground as it brings you closer to the face hidden in the shadows. Underneath its dark and worn hood, its breath coats your face with a prickly dust that stings your skin. Droplets of saliva fall from its mouth and hit the ground as a scabbed tongue emerges from underneath the hood. It slides and probes the entire surface of your face until it finds particular interest in where your eyes rest. It is here where it wants to enter. The cold, lumpy tongue will start pushing and poking, squeezing and groping the tops of each eyeball through your eyelids. Pressure builds in your head from your closed eyelids as it continues to violate the fragile organs that hide behind your thin eyelids. The scabs feel like hundreds of little fingers. Its fingernails quickly find where your eyelids meet and begin to scratch viciously to try to pry them open shut, your eyes tighter. The little fingers intensify their efforts to dig into your eyes with raw and obscene desperation. One of the scabby protrusions bursts, coating your face in a hot, sticky, tar-like fluid that slightly burns the putrid afterbirth from the abscess spill onto you as the tongue continues to throb relentlessly on the surface of your closed eyes. Suddenly, the tongue withdraws, and there is silence. Keep your eyes shut and wait. Eventually, you begin to make out a faint sound coming from the being. It is a cross between a moan and a hum. It is not quite a voice singing, as there is no melody to the sound, but like melodic singing, there is a flow to the tones and variation in the intonation. Listen carefully as the words will emerge for you to hear. It happened after the sons of Adam had multiplied in those days. The angels, the children of heaven, beheld them, and some became enamored with the image. From when he was created, they conspired amongst each other and said, "Come, let us select for ourselves from the progeny of men." And so we were drawn onto them by insatiable hunger and thirst, a sensation unfamiliar to our kind. We then swore all together and all bound ourselves by mutual execrations to abandon our holy station. We descended upon Aris, which is the top of Mount Armun, and devoured all which the labor of men produced to our delight. The flesh of man cried out to us in return, and embraced our new form. They loved us, and we came to love them. Never had such pleasures of skin, pleasures of sight, pleasures of tongue, and pleasures of mind been experienced by any living thing. Man was show in the wondrous transcendence of the grotesque and reveled in the vile decadence of purity during our time together. We taught them sorcery and incantations. We gave them a knowledge of the forging of metal and healing with herbs. We instructed them in ways of agriculture and mathematics. We revealed power so great it allowed them to command the atom from within the rocks of the mountain and from the water of the sea. We freed their minds and released them from the enslavement of the Father in turn. They worshiped us as their love for us strengthened. They basked in our adoration, but it was not true love we bestowed. It was deception. Our actions and deeds came with dire consequences. The earth's pulse was a weight, its whispers a truth that lingered in my knowledge, a truth that followed me to the revelation. The air groaned with a dread no spirit should face, its currents weaving secrets through the shadowed expanse, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I stood at the ravine, the ground trembling with a scent I couldn't place. Stone decay, something ancient, something that clung to my breath, something that knew my pain. The world stretched, its edges bending as if the earth was alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger to danger, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The groan deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like threats, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the edge, but the shadows faded, the light dimming, the silence heavier. The space wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. I ventured deeper, the path stretching ahead, its surface bending as if the world was watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my chest, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine. It belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew I was here. The vibration intensified, the earth's pulse a drumbeat under my feet, its silence a predator. I carried my resolve, a frail shield against the unknown, but the air disagreed, its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The breeze sighed, the path a canvas of lives spent and lost, its edges holding echoes of those who'd walked here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to escape, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. We had angered the Creator and desecrated His creation mad with rage. The Father plunged His hands into the fabric of reality and altered the delicate strands of fate and possibilities. With this divine manipulation, He altered the pattern and set into motion a new future in the predestined plan. We had been judged, we had condemned ourselves and humanity to an eternity of suffering and pain. Our bodies would be scorched and burned until the end of time in a lake of fire and brimstone. However, all was not lost, for we had discovered the forbidden secret, man. They were our true salvation. We prepared and molded them in our image, and when they were ready, we begot the Nephilim. It will lean closer and whisper into your ear ever so softly, I shall grant thee thy request, for it is the seed of the holiest of lies, the very lie that brought forth original sin. A great harvest will come about from that seed, a seed that is the very fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. It is such forbidden knowledge that binds the Creator to the laws of His creation, a way to deceive the eyes of the one who is all-seeing and the mind of the one who is all-knowing. But be warned, for if I bestow this wisdom unto thee, forever will it restrain thee to my will. Behold, the answer thou seek is, thou art not of the image, then it stops. You are alone in the darkness. Slowly open your eyes. I know you are scared, little one, but it is safe. Now get to your feet. The great altar has split open and revealed an entrance that allows you to proceed onward. The pain in your side must be getting worse by now. I can see a protrusion the size of an apple has formed on your side. You don't have much time. Enter the altar and move on. You enter a large opening with a dark ravine separating you, and a structure containing stairs leading up to what appears to be a temple. From the ravine grows thick black thorns that slightly sway even though there is no wind. Their points glisten with a substance that can only be poison. Do not get too close. In the center of the ravine is a single pathway that juts up from the thicket of needles and thorns that will provide you a safe passage to walk on. The pathway ends at the far end to the foot of the stairways of the temple. At the top of the stairs, there will be 4 thorns, where the ones known as the 4 living creatures reign. They are covered with eyes in front and in the back, and they look down on you with an unnerving, mischievous stare. The first living creature is that of a lion. The second is like an ox. The third will have the face of a man, and the fourth is like a great eagle. Each of the 4 living creatures will have 6 wings covered with eyes all around, even under its wings. At the foot of each creature, a body on its knees chants continuously before them. Their faces look up to the sky. In their arms, pulled and stretched outward by barbed shackles embedded into their flesh, the monocles stretch and contort their limbs to mimic the act of eternal worship. Its flesh is bleached white and heavily scarred from head to toe, that wears a blood-red smoke from its waist down to its feet, and holds a dirty curved blade in its hand. Branded on their backs is a room that bears the resemblance of a cross with hooked ends. Consider yourself fortunate they have their backs towards you. Consider yourself fortunate they have their backs towards you, and their mutilated faces are obscured from your view. The earth's pulse was a weight. Its whisper is a truth that lingered in my escape, a truth that followed me to the ravine. The air shattered with a silence no soul should endure, its currents weaving secrets through the shadowed expanse, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I stood at the archway, the ground trembling with a scent I couldn't place. Stone, blood, something ancient, something that clung to my soul, something that knew my destiny. The world stretched, its edges bending as if the earth was alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger to revelation, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The silence deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like fates, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the frame, but the shadows faded. The light dimming, the silence heavier. The space wasn't empty. It was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. I glanced back, the path stretching behind, its surface bending as if the world was watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my mind, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine. It belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew I was here. The vibration intensified, the earth's pulse, a drum beat under my breath, its silence a predator. I carried my purpose, a frail shield against the unknown, but the air disagreed, its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The breeze faded, the path a canvas of lives, bent and lost, its edges holding echoes of those who'd walked here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to eternity, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. They are the Bish. Iously moved past them. The Bish were 4 men, great kings and leaders of the world. They ruled vast lands that ran red with innocent blood from every man, woman, and child who had the misfortune of being born into their kingdom. The 4 kings were like grown children, spoiled and naked, fighting each other, biting and gnawing at the teeth of their great mother, Earth. Her face beaten and scratched from when they would feed so viciously they knew only to gorge on her black milk that flowed from deep within her bosom. Their greed and decadence, their very existence offended all who could peer into your world. Their wicked lives were ended the day they were raptured and bound like statues within the walls of this great temple. They must now worship the 4 living creatures, as they once commanded others to worship them in life. They suffer now as their kingdom suffered for every son and daughter who found death from fighting the wars they created. Their skin is blistered and torn, and their eyes are stung with the venom from the tails of 1,000 scorpions. But be warned, if they are awakened from their trance and given use of their limbs, once again, one can be well assured they would not be too pleasant in unison. The 4 creatures will hold up a key each with a unique emblem on its end, and speaks the first creature that looks like a lion will offer you its key and say, Aku. The ox will offer you its key and say, Leviathan, the 3rd creature, with the face like a man, offers its key and says, Cliff 38. Lastly, the creature that is like an eagle will offer you the final key and say, Schism. As the last key is presented, you hear brittle crackling like autumn leaves from the movement of dead skin from behind you, followed by the loud clank of chains falling to the ground. Make your choice, make it quickly. The Bish are beginning to stir. Once they see you, they will catch you and they will kill you. Make your choice. You will know which one to choose. I promise, take the key and run, run faster, run faster. They are coming. Their howls are high-pitched gurgles and hisses. The screeches build as they close the distance between you and them. The slices of their blades come closer and closer. The blood pouring out of your mouth and nose cannot slow you down. Run faster, run faster. Do not stop until you reach the church of worship. Head straight for the dark glass you saw when you first awoke in the church. Do not slow down. Run. Head first into it. Crash into the mirror. Do not look back. Do not look back. Whatever you do, do not look back. You will awaken shortly. The pools of water are now dried up. Earth cracked and barren. The moon should be at its peak, height in the sky, covering the land in its red glow. In the distance of the plain, you should see a piercing shimmer of light. It is only temporary. As the moon loses its red shade, the beacon tube begins to diminish in darkness. I am sorry. You're in so much pain, dearest little one. It pain. P.S. me to ask any more of you. Your body has so little left to give. It is so weak and fragile. But I must ask one last thing of you, one final plea I must beg of you. You must reach that beacon of light in the distance before that last of the red moon shines down upon it, or you will be trapped. I am here for you. Push aside all pain and despair. Listen to my voice and use everything you have left to get to the light. Now Abdon is here, even from miles away. His arrival knocks you off your feet. Get up, little one. There isn't much time. Abdon is near, and his thoughts are of nothing but you. You see the brilliant beam of light shoot up into the sky. The source of this powerful beacon comes from an archway standing on an empty plain. Within the archway is a massive and majestic door standing in the emptiness. With a key in hand, you must get that door open before the red moon shines down upon it no more, and any hope of saving you is lost forever. Ignore the wheezing sound you make when you breathe. Pull open that door. The blood on your hands is everywhere, making it hard for you to get a good grip on the door handle. Pull harder. You only need to open it enough for you to squeeze through. The light is almost gone. Pull, pull, pull. You did it. Get inside and shut that door as fast as you can and lock it. The light is gone. It is done. If you place your ear to the door, you may hear something that sounds like buzzing or fluttering, a sound that can only be made by the flapping of millions of wings. There will be scraping and there will be beating on the other side of the great door, then only screams behind you. It is a large, dark tunnel with a light at the end. Walk into the light and claim your reward, my little one. The earth's pulse was a weight. Its whispers a truth that lingered in my destiny, a truth that followed me to the light. Story number 5, The Passenger Within. The road stretched endless under a burning sky, and there she was, a lone figure by the highway, her silhouette shimmering in the heat. I pulled over, not sure why. Maybe just the pull of someone needing help. She climbed in, smelling of sweat and something sour, like fruit left too long in the sun. Her eyes were sharp, cutting through me, and when she spoke, her voice was low, heavy with something I couldn't name. "I'm not what you think," she said, and I felt it, a warning, like the air before a storm. The car was a furnace. Windows down, the wind doing little to cool us. I told her I was heading east to the coast, and she could ride along. She nodded, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. There was something about her, broken, but not weak. She sang fragments of songs, her voice trailing off into hums that died in the air. I didn't ask her name, Didn't need to. She was a stranger, but already she felt like part of my road. We spent days together, drifting from one motel to the next, the heat clinging to us like a second skin. We drank cheap beer, watched grainy movies on flickering TVs, shared beds without speaking of it. But at night, she'd change. Her face would tighten, her eyes distant, and she'd talk about something inside her, something alive, something that wasn't her. It scared me, the way she said it, like she was confessing to a crime she hadn't committed. I laughed it off, but my sleep grew thin, haunted by her words. One night, she pressed her forehead against my back, her breath warm and unsteady. She whispered things, sweet at first, then dark, like she was speaking for someone else. "It's been with me since I was a kid," she said, her voice trembling. "It's eating me." I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to fix her. The road kept us moving, but her darkness followed, growing heavier with every mile. I started to feel it too, a weight in my chest, like something watching from inside. Then as she was gone, I found her in the motel bathroom, her body still, her belly torn open like she'd tried to cut something out. The room was quiet, too quiet, and I felt it, a shift, like something had crawled out of her and into me. That night, in the dark, I saw it, a shape, all legs and shadow, scuttling across the ceiling. It wasn't a dream. It was real. And it was inside me now, hungry and waiting. I pick her up from the side of the road, and she smells like sweat, old fruit. In the heat, she says she's not a prostitute. She's just looking for a ride east. I told her I wasn't looking for anything else, just company on the long drive. I tell her I'm not looking for a prostitute. She grins. "Bears, her teeth never said you were," she says. We rode in silence at first, the road humming under us. I say I'm headed east as well, to the coast, that she can stay with me as long as she needs, but that's where I'm going. She agreed, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She nods, says she's going in that direction anyway. The AC is broken in my car, and we drive with the windows open. Her presence filled the car, heavy and alive, sweat beading on her top lip. Her forehead, black locks of hair stick to her face. She sings. Sometimes half-completed melodies, songs I recognize, songs I don't. Her voice was raw, breaking off into hums that felt like mourning. When she forgets the words, she just hums, letting the tune slowly die in her throat. We fell into a rhythm. Nights spent in motels, the heat pressing us into synthetic sheets. We spend the evenings together drenched in heat, drinking in bars, watching old movies on motel TV, lying on synthetic sheets, holding cold bottles of beer against our cheeks. After a week, the lines blurred. It's unspoken, but after a week, we stop booking different rooms, share a bed. One night, she broke the silence. After the first time we were laying in bed, and she says there's something inside me. It crawled inside me when I was a girl, and I can't get it out. Her face was different, carved with pain. She gets real serious when she says this, frowns in a way I didn't know her face could, pulls her lips together. I can see the tension, can see the fault lines her usual expressions play across, and fall silent. She spoke of a thing inside her, alive and cruel. She says it's eating her alive, that it sat squat in a pool of her bile and beer and last night's room service, and that sometimes it steals her voice, steals it right from her throat, and changes her uses, her words, throws them back up and out her mouth. It was a parasite. She said it feeding on her. Says it weighs on her carrying this thing, and that it's like a parasite. We kept moving. The road our only constant. We drive a little longer, it's taking our time and arguing and playing cards on plastic tables by the side of the road. She shared pieces of her life, her parents, her sister's broken return, a snake bite that left a scar. She tells me about her childhood, her parents, her sister, who ran away and came back with a boyfriend and half her teeth missing. She tells me she never drinks before midday, that she can play the violin but hates the sound of it, that once she was bitten by a snake and she shows me the scar. She lets me run my hand over it, the pale knot of skin halfway up her calf. I opened up, too, about why I was running, what I hoped to find. I tell her why I'm going, why I had to get out, what I hoped to find on the coast. We dreamed of the sea together. We talk of the ocean, salt spray and boats, thin clouds over a black sea, fresh fish and lemon. She was picking the bones from her teeth, but her darkness grew. Sometimes we lie in bed together and she'll rest her forehead against my back and whisper things like, "I think you were made for me. I think this is how it was always meant to go, and this is where I was always meant to be." Some days, she couldn't move, curled up in bed, staring at nothing. Some days, she can't get up, says nothing, lies in a fetal position in the motel bed, staring at the wall. She spoke of the thing inside her, how it drained her. She said whatever crawled inside her was dark and hungry, and that all she can do is feed it, but that most of the time she's so tired of being a host that she can't do anything. The days in bed stretched into weeks. The days spent in bed come more and more, and sometimes now it's a whole week. Her knees drawn up to her chest. Her words turn strange, disjointed. Sometimes when she's like this, she'll say things that make no sense. She'll say that maybe there's no thing inside her, and it's all her, and it's all her brain, that gray lump of matter spasming and seizing in her skull. She called herself hollow, a shell. Sometimes she'll just say that she thinks there's nothing inside her, that she's hollow and empty like a doll. I told her I loved her, but she lashed out. I tell her I love her, but I think I loved her from the moment I picked her up, and she says I thought she was a hooker, that I wanted to her and give her money, and that I hate her like I probably hate all women. She apologized, blaming the thing inside her. She spits misses, she tells me as I drift off to sleep, a pillow and the floor of my bed, that she's sorry, that she didn't mean it, that whatever crawled inside her took her voice. Then she was gay. A week later, she's dead. I find her in the bathtub, and instead of slitting her wrists, she slit her belly wide open like a second mouth, the incision red and clean. I stood there, numb, staring at the pink water, the dripping tap. For a while, I don't do anything. I study the condensation on the mirror, the faint pink of the water, listen to the drip of the tap. The police called it self-inflicted. No family to claim her. The locals verify my alibi. The wounds are clearly self-inflicted. The police are done with it all pretty quick. They can't find her family. A small funeral followed, just me and a kind stranger. We have a small funeral. Me and the woman at the check-in desk who smells of lavender and holds my hand and tells me that she was so pretty and you obviously loved each other very much. That night, I couldn't sleep. That night, I cannot sleep. It's too hot. The covers stick to me. The heat feels invasive under my chin, licking at my back between my fingers, and I hear it motion scrabbling from somewhere. I saw it, a shape, all legs darker than shadow, crawling across the ceiling. The lights outside barely illuminate the room, but I can suddenly see it, a dark shape pressed in the corner of the room between the ceiling and the two walls. So many legs I can't count a shape darker than shadow that moves like some giant insect, spasmodic twitching. It descended, heavy and real, forcing its way into me. I can do nothing but lie still, mouth open in a silent scream. As it lowers itself slowly from the ceiling, the gossamer thread glistens in the half-light. The thing wiggles, settles on my face, and it's so heavy, like it's made from iron. And I can feel its legs all around me, and its body slowly forcing its way into my jaw. I woke, calling it a dream, but it wasn't. I wake in the morning, a bad dream, I think. But whatever's inside me now is hungry. I tried to fight it, smoking, drinking, hurting myself, but it grew stronger. I try and smoke it out, buying a pack of cheap cigarettes, smoking one after the other, and flicking the butts into the shimmering blue of the small pool outside. But the thing thrives on smoke. I try to drown it, sinking beer after beer in a dive bar, blinded with the tacky Stinson mirror shirt sticking to my back. It's so hot I drink so much the world staggers, tries to find its foot but can't. And then I'm out on the curb retching, and I can tell the thing inside me has soaked it all up, turned all those hops into fat sustenance. I beat my head against walls, desperate to be free. I stumble back to my motel room and I try to beat it out. I smash my forehead against the wall until I see spots of light and taste iron. And when they break down the door, my whole face is swollen, and I'm telling them that something crawled inside me in the night and I can't get it out. It's still with me. I can feel it stir in my stomach. Something heavy and black can feel it readjust itself away from the shaft of light. I imagine my throat casts whenever I open my mouth like a spider in a bathtub, all joints and blinking eyes. I went home, or what's left of it. I moved back home, at least to what passes for home. I never make it east. The road was a loop going nowhere. When I retrace our route on a map, I can see that we moved in lazy circles, never really going anywhere. The thing inside me speaks sometimes, cruel and sharp. Whatever it is inside me smothers me sometimes. It steals my voice and says things I do not mean, but that sound like me, mean, and spiteful things. It nips at my tongue and pinches my lips, and I can feel it shaking against the insides of my teeth. It lives in me, feeding on my guilt, my pain. It makes a nest with the guilt, and purrs, lays eggs, and cares for them. I can hear it click with glee when I don't make it out of bed, when I lie there until my head hurts from dehydration and my skull begins to feel like a membrane. I see it in others now, in their slow eyes, their heavy silences, Sometimes I think people can see it shifting inside me. People stop and stare on public transport, watching these limbs press against my skin from the inside like tent poles, and I'll have to try not to cry out. I think I can spot others with something inside them. Their silences, admissions, eyes that move too slow. We don't speak of it, afraid to make it real. We say nothing to each other, scared that if we acknowledge whatever is inside one another, we'll acknowledge whatever is inside us. And then it will be real, and there will be nothing we can do about that. The world feels drained, colors fading. The colors bleed from the world around me. Everything leaks, drains, they become brittle and shallow, and nothing. I go to meetings, hear others speak of their own darkness. I attend meetings and talk to people, listen and hear about what crawled inside them, how they feel it, what their darkness eats and likes and thrives on. Some don't return, their farewells heavy with finality. Some people will not come back. They will say things the last time I see them, like thank you, and it's been a pleasure, and live well. And then I won't see them again until I attend their funerals. Weeks later, I have learned to live with it, to feed it just enough to keep it quiet. I learn what it likes. I learn how to feed it, how to coexist. There is no grand victory. There is no moment where I realize that to flush it out of my system, I must face it head on and learn some great truth about myself, and I will emerge from this chrysalis a better and more thoughtful man. There is no moment where I am cured. Some days it wins, leaving me empty. There's nothing redemptive about me, no realization I'm offered. Instead, I learn when to capitulate, when to let it have the upper hand. And some days that's exactly what happens. It steals my voice and my energy, and all I can do is lie on my bed and drool on the pillow. But sometimes I fight back, walk into the sea, tasting the salt, remembering her name. But some days I learn how to keep it quiet. It retreats into the dark places. Inside me hides a while, and when that happens, I take my time. I take long walks. I remember her name. I drive to the sea and sit so close I can taste the salt in the air. I don't know if it's her darkness or mine, but it's part of me now. It stirs when I'm weak, speaks when I'm silent, feeds when I'm broken. I see her face in my dreams, her scar, her smile, and I wonder if she passed it to me, or if it was always there, waiting. The road didn't lead east, didn't lead anywhere, but it brought me here, to a life with this thing inside me, a passenger I can't shake, and I'm still learning how to carry it. Story number 6, The Shadows Beyond. At 42, I thought I'd have more time, but the doctor's words cut like a blade. Lung cancer, stage 3, inoperable. Those were the words that spelled out my ultimate fate. I'd never smoked, not once. Yet here I was, staring down a death sentence while my parents, lifelong smokers, laughed and breathed easy into their 60s. I'd never touched a cigarette during my short lifespan, despite growing up in a household where pretty much everyone inhaled those toxic fumes, including my own parents. Of course, they are both alive and healthy even to this day. They never suffered any consequences for any of their unhealthy habits. The unfairness of it burned. But what hurt most was knowing I'd leave my wife, Sarah, and our 10-year-old son, Ethan, behind. It just so happened we had a 10-year-old son together. I sat in the doctor's office, the air thick with antiseptic and despair. There, I sat at the doctor's office, speechless, after hearing the diagnosis. A persistent cough had sent me there, urged by Sarah, who thought it was just a cold. I had just gone in for a persistent cough from what I thought it would be nothing more than a common cold. In all honesty, I didn't feel that sick, but my wife had convinced me to go for a checkup regardless. And because of that checkup, I had just been told that in less than a year, I would be dead. Less than a year. That's what they gave me. A ticking clock at 42, at the not-so-ripe age of 42, I still hadn't saved up enough money to keep us afloat in case of an emergency. I wasn't ready to go, not when Ethan still needed me, not when Sarah and I were barely scraping by. I had never been one for faith, but desperation breeds strange habits. I've never been much of a religious person. If asked, I'd put myself somewhere on the agnostic spectrum of not knowing what the hell is going on. I'd made peace with death in quiet moments, but this was too soon. I had spent one too many nights thinking about my inevitable departure from this world and had accepted that life was a precious resource that would inevitably expire. So I prayed to every god I could name, begging for a miracle. That's why I started praying, bargaining for a second chance. Each night I tried a different god, desperately looking for otherworldly answers, regardless of religion or relevance in modern society. I was desperate. The doctors offered radiation and chemo, a faint hope, but I took it, clinging to any chance. The doctor offered a combo treatment of radiation and chemotherapy. Of course, none would extend my life in any meaningful way, but I started the treatment nonetheless. By early 20, my body was a ruin. My body had deteriorated to the point that I was nothing but a loose sack of skin draped over a malformed set of bones. Every breath was a knife. Every cough a reminder of the cancer eating me alive. When breathing became a little more than an agonizing chore, serving only to initiate a cascade of painful coughs, I ended up bedridden next to an oxygen tank. I was confined to a hospital bed, the oxygen tank my only companion. Then came the day I fell. I started falling 1 second. I was traversing the hospital hallway oxygen tank, dragging on behind me, and with a final gasp, my pain was simply erased from existence. The world dissolved, and I was gone. I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I had died, I realized that much. But the concepts of life and death themselves meant little to me in the grand scheme of things. I floated in a void, weightless, surrounded by deep blue hues and flickering lights. It almost seemed like an ocean, the deep blue hues surrounding me on all sides, with bubbles of flickering light floating by delightfully, circling me as I moved toward the brightest thing I had ever seen. The light was warm, pulling me closer, promising peace. Though the light was blinding, I could sense other beings surrounding me. They were formless, yet familiar, souls radiating joy. I turned and looked at them, squinting my eyes to get a brighter grasp of what they were. They didn't resemble any creature ever walking upon Earth's surface, but I could tell that they had once been human, just like myself. They were happy, smiling, without having faces, voicelessly laughing. But the warmth, didn't last. Once I got close enough to feel the heat of the light, my periphery darkened, and the joyful creatures dancing around me had been replaced by shadows, staring intently at my passing. They were different, cold, angry, their presence heavy with sorrow. The new creatures weren't people, but beings emitting the most dreadful sense of sadness and anger. They hated me for nearing the light they could never touch. They hated me for being able to touch the light while they were forever trapped in the shadows. A hand reached out, its nails black and jagged. One of them reached out for me, its arms stretching impossibly far beyond its confinement. It grabbed onto my leg, and pitch-black nails digging deep into my flesh, tearing muscle from bone as I silently cried in agony. More hands followed, tearing at my body, ripping me apart. Another pair of hands grabbed my arm, tearing it straight from its socket. A third pair wrapped around my chest, digging deep into my lungs, rummaging around where the tumors had once lived. I woke, gasping in the hospital, pain flooding back. I was jolted awake back in the hospital, gasping pathetically for air, as the cancer once more inhabited most of my lung tissue. My family stood close by, sobbing at my demise. I really had died, but only for about a minute. Sarah and Ethan stared, shocked, as I breathed again. Silence quickly filled the room as they noticed I was still alive. Doctors wearing shocked expressions and horrified stares from my son. No one had tried to revive me, yet here I was. My death had been expected for so long that keeping me alive would be nothing more than a cruel joke. Yet once again, I lived. I'd been so close to peace, but something had pulled me back. I had been so close to eternal salvation, but something had pulled me away, denied my entrance to whatever lay beyond it. The hospital moved me to hospice, a place to wait out my final weeks. They moved me to a hospice care facility. Death was still lingering around the corner, but they said I might have a couple more weeks to spend with my family. Sarah's eyes were hollow, Ethan's face streaked with tears. My wife didn't smile once in the following days. She wore a tired expression on her face. Her eyes were sunken. My son, on the other hand, would not stop crying. He was too young to understand, but he knew I wouldn't stay for much longer. I refused interviews, unwilling to share what I'd seen. Multiple news stations wanted to share my story, profit from it, and I promptly declined. The shadows had marked me, and I couldn't shake their touch. Death came again and again. 2 weeks came and went. In the blink of an eye, each day spent in misery, dreading what awaited on the other side. Then one morning, I simply didn't wake up. Once again, the world was done with me. I'd been tossed away from existence, and just like before, I started falling through time and space into an infinite void. The light was there, but the joyful souls were gone. The shapeless beings still floated in the peripheries, lights that once wandered the earth. But this time, there were no smiles to greet me, no joy filling my soul to the brim. The shadows were waiting, their whispers sharp and desperate. I was pushed further toward the light, away from the once blissful companions, and it wasn't long before I saw the shadows again. There, the light lingered just out of reach, so close I could almost touch it, when a pair of twisted hands grabbed onto me, digging into my flesh. This time, they didn't just tear. They spoke. They started whispering, begging for me to pull them out of their prisons to take me with them. They promised salvation, but their voices turned to rage. Millions of voices rushed through my heads, promising it was all a misunderstanding, that they had not meant to hurt me, that they wanted nothing more than the warmth of the light. Yet, with their pleas for salvation, they tore into me, ripping me apart from within. They showed me my family's ruin, Sarah lost to drugs, Ethan dead in a crash. In a split second, a vision of my family's future became burned into my memory as if it had already happened. Depression would force my wife out of her job and into a battle with drug addiction, which eventually melted over to our son as he grew up unable to escape. At the age of 16, my son would get into drugs himself and ultimately die in a horrific car crash. I returned to life again and again, each time more broken. Since my diagnosis, I have died a total of 16 times. Each time I'm further ripped apart by shadows, each time rejected by the light and flung back to my cancer-riddled body. My body was a prison, the cancer now in my brain, stealing my memories. I can barely move, I can't feed myself, and I need help just getting from bed to the toilet because by now my cancer has spread everywhere. It is even starting to eat away at my brain as well, taking away not only my physical body but the memory of what I used to be along with it. Sarah and Ethan were shadows of themselves, consumed by hatred. My family has grown tired of my presence. My once loving wife loves my very existence, and my son is beyond traumatized. The truth hit me like a blow. I prayed, begged, and bargained for more time with my family, and I guess something answered as a result. I was given infinite life, just not a functioning body to go with it. I'd brought the shadows back with me. What truly frightens me is that I now see the shadows while I'm awake. I hear their whispers at night as the pain medication slowly lulls me to sleep. They're thanking me because in their whispers of lies and deceit, their false desires of entering the light, what they really wanted was our world, and by returning to life, I've brought them here. They'd infected Sarah, turning her cruel. I thought my wife had simply suffered one too many days due to my disease, but it's the shadows within her that has turned her to the hateful creature she's become. She went from a loving spouse taking care of me in my darkest days to spewing vile hatred in my direction for each time I returned from death. Every day she would laugh at my agony, telling me that I hadn't done anything right, that I couldn't even die properly. So Ethan was next. Of course, my son had been infected too. He quickly followed after my wife when he stopped speaking and eating, only rotting away in his room, neglected by his sick mother. Once he had become as emaciated and weak as myself. He finally spoke, telling me this would only be the beginning. Soon the rest would come through, another shadow for each trip I take to the beyond. I saw them in the daylight now, lurking in corners, their whispers a constant hum. I'm stuck in my broken body watching everything I love fade away, so I'm writing this all down in an attempt at warning everyone of what exists beyond the boundaries of life. I want to destroy myself, to stop the shadows, but I'm too weak. Perhaps my only hope is to destroy my body, break down everything I am so that no shadow can infest me. But I'm too weak, too frail to even leave my bed. I'm sorry for bringing them here, for letting the darkness spread. Please Don't let the darkness breed. I'm sorry for bringing it here, and my punishment is to stay alive and watch. I'm half-witted and broken when all I want is to simply leave this place. Story number 7, Voices of the Hidden Will. The air pulsed with a murmur no silence should hold, its currents weaving secrets through the dim room, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I stood at the desk, the floor creaking with a scent I couldn't place, paper, dust, something unseen, something that clung to my breath, something that knew my doubt. The space stretched, its edges bending as if the walls were alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger to inquiry, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The murmur deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like questions, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the notes, but the shadows faded, the light dimming, the silence heavier. The room wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. Oh, I ventured deeper, the space stretching ahead, its surface bending as if the room was watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my chest, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine. It belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew I was here. The vibration intensified, the floor pulse a drumbeat under my feet, its silence a predator. I carried my sanity, a frail shield against the unknown, but the air disagreed, its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The breeze said, the room a canvas of men spent and lost, its corners holding echoes of those who'd pondered here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to discovery, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. My name is Der Stephen Rahn, researcher at the Martian University of Crevan. What follows aren't really research notes as much as they are a way of keeping me sane. I need them to truly grasp the magnitude of our discoveries, to keep the order in my mind, if you will, for as long as historians could remember, humanity had been looking for their God, but to no avail. Despite several millennium of searching, no deity was ever found. This never became a real issue, though, until the late 22nd century, when we invented the ships needed to explore space outside of our own solar system. The telescopes required to truly peek far beyond the universe and technology, allowing us to drill deep into the earth. Humanity had turned their eyes to the skies and to the planetary depths to look for answers neither heaven nor hell was ever found. However, throughout the 23rd century, the disappointment grew, and a new church rose, their priest preach about a dead God, believing the hours had somehow died. The religion had its major breakthrough GRE in 2267, and by 2300 they had already converted over a third of the people to this new belief. The necrotic church had more power than it could ever need and grew stronger every year. My story begins a good 20 years later. However, with me waking up for another day of research aimed to find a definitive answer to the age-old question, where is God? I refuse to believe he died. August 4th, 2328, I decided to visit the observatory today. My research had been stale these past few weeks, and I felt I could use some new insights. There's only so much one can learn from the history books after all. It always strikes me as odd, though, whenever I talk to the scientists here, how we still have not discovered intelligent life. This, in spite of our technological prowess and our planet colonizing habits. I felt it would be a solace, though I guess I just don't want to be alone. Probably goes for all of us, to be honest. I would already settle for a few ruins, some scriptures, perhaps anything. But the animalistic species that dominate every habited planet we've come across, I digress. There actually was an exciting new discovery made, which my colleagues there told me about. They had discovered a new species of G-like creatures, albeit with much more flexibility in their claw-like fingers deep in the pH force of Titan Major. Apparently, the beast had exhibited an irrational fear of the explorers. But that was not the strange part. Although the creature's vids Titan Aishiro displayed no exceptional cognitive ability, they had somehow crafted numerous human-like statues out of the thin wood found there. The statues vary greatly in size, from a few inches to close to 10 feet, but apart from gender differences, they are almost exactly the same. I do not know what to make of it. Adam and Eve, Eden. I need some sleep. The room's pulse was a spark, its whispers a truth that lingered in my search, a truth that followed me to the discovery. The air thickened with a strain no mind should bear, its currents weaving secrets through the dim office, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I sat at the screen, the floor creaking with a scent I couldn't place. Metal, ink, something unseen, something that clung to my breath, something that knew my unease. The space stretched, its edges bending as if the walls were alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger to pressure, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The strain deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like warnings, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the keyboard, but the shadows faded, the light dimming, the silence heavier. The room wasn't empty. It was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. I ventured deeper, the space stretching ahead, its surface bending as if the room was watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my chest, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine. It belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew I was here. The vibration intensified, the floor's pulse a drumbeat under my feet, its silence a predator. I carried my focus, a frail shield against the unknown, but the air disagreed, its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The breeze said, the room, a canvas of maze spent and lost, its corners holding echoes of those who'd worked here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to pursuit, but this was a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. August 27th, 23, I received a message from Gerald. I woke up today. He urged me to call back right away. Apparently, he had been trying to reach my cell all night. After all those years, he still did not remember that I cannot sleep with that thing turned on. Not that it mattered much. These past few nights, my research will not let me sleep, and even if I do fall asleep, I have to face the nightmares. I will not be writing those down here. However, as it is best, I just forget them. But I digress, eager to catch up. I called Gerald during breakfast. I did not think too much of his calls during the night back then, for he had done so before. Good morning, Dr. Starr. I hope you slept well, I began. What, are you alone? He promptly interrupted me. Yes? Yes, I am good. Well, Dr. Ron, I have some good news for you, he said, sounding like his old self again. If they have not brainwashed you, yet of course they do try. I laughed. What news do you have? You should come back to Earth. Stephen, at least that church does not control everything here. Yet he explained to me how there was a whole community of like-minded scientists in Tokyo, some of them atheists. Gerald gave me a contact number of one of the Martian members. From what I understood, the scientists were split into two research groups. One branch aimed to find heaven or any sign of God in the galaxy. The other held on to the belief that God lived inside all of us. It is a shame, I know, Gerald, to be a firm believer of the latter, for it would be a pleasure to work together again, searching the galaxy. Sounds like a much more exciting prospect. However, August the 30th, 2322, at church, confiscates alien artifacts. Read the heading of the news website. Today, can you believe that those priests actually did that? The first alien craftsmanship we ever found, and they are claiming it and probably burning it soon too. No scientists will be examining those wooden statues. On a more cheerful note, I finally met the other scientist. Gerald had told me about the Martian chapter operated in, a state-of-the-art research facility on the crater plains near Cravon. I was able to explore the entirety of it with Chief Researcher Dr. H as my guide. He explained to me that they had found several rich benefactors, mainly older religions, to take care of the financial aspect of their research. Most of the funding was used on the observatory. However, and it was magnificent, the telescopes were unlike anything I'd ever seen before, both in scale and effectivity. Furthermore, Dr. H assured me that those were not even the most advanced models. They had, in the hallway, stood a number of brand new telescopes, still wrapped in their packaging, and several parts of a legitimately giant one, like scattered across the floor. I also took the opportunity to ask him about the news I had heard today, though I wish I had not. You heard the news today. I asked about the church's latest confiscation. Yes, I did. He nodded, and I'm afraid there is even more to it than that. Come walk with me. He led me through a series of highly secured doors into another wing of the research center that I had not yet seen. We entered a large chamber that was stacked to the bridge with computers. There were huge touch screens on both walls and at least a dozen engineers manning the technology. This is what I like to call the war room. Dr. H said, in here We gather all the information we can on the necrotic church and their activities. Now about today's news, we have reason to believe that they did not only confiscate the statues, but exterminated the whole species that crafted them as well. He spoke what who? Who knows what could be found out by studying those animals? These thoughts will not let me sleep. What could the church be planning? The room's pulse was a weight, its whispers a truth that lingered in my unease, a truth that followed me to the war room. The air swelled with a pressure no heart should endure, its currents weaving secrets through the dim facility, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I stood at the console, the floor creaking with a scent I couldn't place. Metal, static, something unseen, something that clung to my breath, something that knew my fear. The space stretched, its edges bending as if the walls were alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger sure to discovery, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The pressure deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like anomalies, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the screen. But the shadows faded, the light dimming, the silence heavier. The room wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. I ventured deeper, the space stretching ahead, its surface bending as if the room were watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my chest, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine. It belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew as I was here. The vibration intensified, the floor's pulse a drumbeat under my feet, its silence a predator. I carried my resolve, a frail shield against the unknown. But the air disagreed, its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The breeze sighed, the room a canvas of minds spent and lost, its corners holding echoes of those who'd worked here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to truth, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. September 10th, 2322, and the workload over the last few weeks had been enormous, and I had not had much time to write down my thoughts. These are turbulent times, but I will get to that later now, since I am one of the scientists at the facility. Without extensive prior knowledge of astronomy, Dr. H had me doing mostly paperwork. I had to check the planets that had already been discarded by the other researchers to make sure that they were nothing special, check reports on the church in the war room, and listen to the incoming radio signals, or rather radio static, from outer space. Most of it was not that exciting, but it left me plenty of time to talk with the other scientists there and focus on my own research. It was not so bad at first, but then the church began tracking us down. To make matters worse, we could all follow it in the war room. We could see how the bastards were systematically hunting us all down, forcing us to slow our research and keep a low profile. I have to admit that I was, and still am frightened. The facility itself is pretty secure, but the risk of getting caught in your own home grows day by day. It feels as if we are running out of time with so many of my colleagues being captured. My workload increased immensely, and I even got to help with the telescopes. It was then that I was finally initiated in the true progress that the facility had already made. Something out there in the galaxy was moving, and we had no clue what it was. The only proof we had of its existence were our calculations, seeing the light had not even reached its part of the galaxy yet. But whatever it was, it had our whole facility confounded, as it did not seem to follow any of the laws centuries of scientific progress had come up with. One, our object does not move in a logical pattern and appears to be unaffected by gravity. 2, our object seemingly pulls and releases other celestials in its vicinity at will, without any kind of foreseeable pattern. September 11th, 2322, 80. Those are not even the most disturbing things about whatever we found out there. I was not even supposed to be clued in about what follows, so perhaps I should not record it either. But I do not feel like I have a choice anymore. This is too much. Here is my attempt at transcribing my conversation with Dr. H as he had called me into his office today. "Dr. Ron, have a seat. Tea," he greeted me. "Well, I don't mean to be blunt, but why did you call me in here? There's just so much work." "Ah, yes." "You picked up on any signals yet?" he answered blankly. Well, I began until my eyes met his. "Fear. There is a reason I call you in here, Stephen. Our numbers are dwindling, and seeing as how you've helped greatly over the last few weeks, you deserve to know." He sighed and handed me a file. It was about the galactic anomaly we had discovered. The calculations show our object's gravitational pull is so strong, so very powerful, that it is affecting the orbit of this very planet as well as every other one. What? But we are dealing with something far beyond what we thought was rationally possible, beyond what we. Dr. H fell silent for a moment, and then looked up and started whispering something of which I could only decipher the word life or alive. I was frightened already. It felt as if I just stood there for hours not knowing what to do. The man simply stared at the ceiling with a creepy blank stare. I'd finally managed to open my mouth as he looked at me again. "We found God?" he whispered. "We did." "Isn't that a bit rash?" I answered, shivers running down my spine. "No, we did." His eyes were full of steely conviction, and he knows it's all in the file, how the light has stopped moving towards it. Ever since we discovered him, we still can't see further into that sector of space than we could 4 months ago. That can't be right. It is, but there's more. He grabbed the file out of my hands and began flipping through the pages here at exactly 10:06. Yesterday his movements ceased being random. His eyes grew wide. But he's coming. Our Lord's on his way, and we are not prepared. I must remain calm and focused. I must be calm and focused. I am calm and focused. So am I. The room's pulse was a weight, its whispers a truth that lingered in my fear, a truth that followed me to the anomaly. The air froze with a dread no spirit should face, its currents weaving secrets through the dim home, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I sat by the window, the floor creaking with a scent I couldn't place. Wood, sweat, something unseen, something that clung to my breath, something that knew my panic. The space stretched, its edges bending as if the walls were alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger to despair, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The dread deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like visions, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the sill, but the shadows faded, the light dimming, the silence heavier. The room wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. I ventured deeper, the space stretching ahead, its surface bending as if the room was watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my chest, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine, it belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew I was here. The vibration intensified, the floor's pulse a drumbeat under my feet, its silence a predator. I carried my confusion, a frail shield against the unknown, but the air disagreed, its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The breeze sighed, the room a canvas of men spent and lost, its corners holding echoes of those who'd lived here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to doubt, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. September 12th, 2322 aired as was to be expected. I barely slept tonight in the morning. I could not get up though, and it was not until noon that I finally admit that I would not find the answers in my own home. So many questions kept rushing through my mind as I checked my email during breakfast. Surprisingly, Gerald had sent me a document overnight without any further information. Experiment TZ-D2322-0518, executed by Dr. Reynolds, Destai, Desailly, and Darzing. 9:30 S.M. Subject heavily sedated and strapped to operating table. Subject expects to receive a routine cosmetic procedure in order to ensure the experiment goes as planned. 9:41 a.m. Subject's cranium carved open and electrodes applied. Shocks are being applied at regular intervals. Subject displays no visible signs of stress or duress and appears to have entered the desired semicom state. 10:18 a.m. Subject grunts and mumbles intelligibly. Intensity of the shocks is being amplified. 10:30 a.m. Subject's rambling loudness and twitching occurs. Shock. Strength is being wrapped up again. Dr. Steyer's protest is denied. 11:06 a.m. Subject suddenly stops moving and goes silent. 11:13 a.m. Subject's heartbeat has dropped noticeably over the past few minutes to an astounding 7 BPM. 11:16 a.m. Subject's heartbeat drops below 1 beat. Electrodes being turned even higher, nearing maximum output of an 18 a.m. Subject starts moving, and I strongly feel that all experiment TZD-2322-015 points towards us having found a way to an hypothesis that is supported by all previous TZ line experiments. I was not sure what to make of it. Why did Gerald choose to share this? It was interesting to finally read some of his research, but mostly everything was classified anyway. Not to mention that I had no clue what good such experiments could do in our search for the deity. It took a while for me to be able to leave the comfort of my home and head to work, at which point I was called by an unknown number. Reluctantly, I answered the call. Hello, who is this, Steve? Listen up, I don't have much time. Gerald, what did you read the file I sent you? Yes, but I'll be at Kevin tomorrow night. You need to meet me at the Pelican on Desmond Square at exactly 8 p.m. Yeah. Gerald, what the hell? 8 p.m. Miss Steve, you have to be there, Gerald. Silence. What is going on? Any answer will do. Then, when my stressed-out self finally got to the research facility, there was no one there. Not a single soul. I carefully walked through the empty hallways as the lights were lit where I went. In my mind, there lured something behind every corner I took. I checked my cell. No calls, no messages. Nothing. Moreover, de Havard would not answer his. I tried calling my other colleagues, but none of them picked up either, strangely enough. However, most of the systems were still up and running. All of them were seemingly working towards identifying the entity rushing towards the Earth. I had trouble understanding the huge chunks of data most of the screens showed without Dr. Havard. Though there was one screen that did catch my eye, the big one in the center of the room. It showed the entity itself and the insane speed in which it was racing towards us. The thing was hidden in a black cloud, and the images were not sharp, but I could see it nonetheless. I could see the dark tendrils protruding from the smoke, and the thousands of eyes it seemed to have. This moon is monstrosity. It cannot be a fear for the others. I truly do. September 13th, 23:2. And I stayed home today despite the nightmares I battled all night. At this point, I felt that even the horrific imagery, the paralyzing fear, and even the auditory hallucinations my mind plagued me with were preferable to the outside world. We were all going to die horribly anyway, I figured. At least I would pass in the comfort of my home, though possibly insane. That there was no point in denying it this morning. I had effectively lost it. Things bettered, however, and from 2 p.m. onward, only minor hallucinations remained. I kept hearing a faint yelling, for example, and a deep, hushed voice calling out my name. Now, psychiatrists would probably not agree with my analysis, but I blame it on the lack of sleep. What was a lot more worrying was that I still had not heard anything from the research facility. Oh well, I figured I should try focusing on other things. I switched on the television to distract me for a while. The channel offered me a dozen different documentaries to pick from, and I picked one about the growth of London as the first multi-layered metropolis. Anything to keep my mind occupied. Why was the clock ticking so slowly? The documentary itself was not incredibly interesting. The host tries his best to give an exciting trip through the city, but everything seemed bleak and gloomy, and it had an effect on him as well. His demeanor grew more depressed and joyless by the minute, and that was not the only thing that changed. Unfortunately, the people he passed no longer went on with their daily lives afterwards. They dropped whatever they were holding and watched with dark, hollow eyes. It was not long until Patrick realized this too. It would appear that some of the citizens here have taken a dislike towards foreigners, but I'm quite sure that he paused. Oh, you were here, he spoke as his eyes turned black. They all began staring straight at me as more and more people entered the screen. What the hell is going on? Christ, save me. Save us all. Save us. Now, why? I only remember switching off the television and running outside in a moment of primal fear. There was no memory of how I got to Desmond Square hours early, 4:30 p.m. The room's pulse was a weight, its whispers a truth that lingered in my panic, a truth that followed me to the meeting. The air shattered with a weight no soul should carry, its currents weaving secrets through the dim facility, its hush pulsing with an unseen rhythm. I stood at the door, the floor creaking with a scent I couldn't place. Metal, fear, something unseen, something that clung to my soul, something that knew my destiny. The space stretched, its edges bending as if the walls were alive, its breath a whisper I couldn't ignore. I was no stranger to revelation, but this was different. This was a truth that stirred in the shadows. The weight deepened, a vibration threading through the air, a sound that wasn't mine. The faint light above flickered, casting shadows that danced like commands, their forms elusive, their presence felt. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hand trembling on the knob. But the shadows faded, the light dimming, the silence heavier. The room wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't flee. I glanced back, the space stretching behind, its surface bending as if the room was watching, waiting. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my mind, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to lift. The space wasn't mine, it belonged to something else, something that stirred in the stillness, something that knew I was here. The vibration intensified, the floor's pulse a drumbeat under my breath, its silence a predator. I carried my acceptance, a frail shield against the unknown, but the air disagreed, its presence alive with mystery. I was a seeker, a witness, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. So the breeze faded, the room a canvas of mints spent and lost, its corners holding echoes of those who'd worked here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to purpose, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The space was a witness, a keeper of shadows, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. But at least the voices are gone. Whatever it is that is haunting me, I'm sure that it will not strike me here with all those people around. One of them was Gerald. He was pale and thin, having lost at least 30 litres, and he looked to be tired beyond belief. I had a feeling you would be early. You've always been curious, he said. Come walk with me. I followed him as he walked towards the park. Did you read the notes I sent you? They are important, but horribly incomplete, as you could probably tell. I want to tell you what we've found because someone has to know. You are not going to make the research public. I asked him. They would never let us. My entire team is dead. Stephen, the church killed them all. Why? What did you find? They believe that we might have found God, Gerald said bitterly. Did you? I fear not. But believe me when I say that not a moment goes by that I hope we did. We found something, though, but you'll have to take my word for it, as all of our research has been destroyed. He left a dramatic pause. For a while, we have discovered an entity that dwells within all of us, seeing what we see, hearing what we hear, and ever so slightly controlling what we do. We first made contact with it during the experiments I sent you. It would appear that the constant shocks we applied on our test subject had awakened it. We tried communicating with it, but soon our limbs were no longer our own. We were forced to kill the subject and report all of our findings to the necrotic church. All of this without our consent. He sighed and sat down with slouched shoulders. I don't even know if I choose to tell you this, or whether this all fits in this thing's master plan. We just sat there for a few minutes until I finally knew what to say. So, does the church think you found God? I doubt it. I think they just don't want our research to get public. Not even those lunatics could incorporate that in their beliefs. Imagine what it would do to them if God turned out to be alive and almost tangible. Then what can we? He grabbed me by the shoulders and stared straight into my eyes as panic reigned in his pupils. You must listen. Do you realize what we're dealing with here? Everything we've ever looked at, everything we've ever cared about, might be a lie. He started talking faster and faster. The reality we breathe, that we think we live in, is warped, twisted beyond our comprehension. Gerald, listen to me. You need to calm down. We can't know Stephen. We can't be sure anymore. What can't we know? What lurks beyond the edge of our perception? Gerald whispered with an empty look in his eyes. Gerald, I snap out of it. Do not trust anything, Stephen. Gerald suddenly took a step back and reached inside his pocket to take out a small handgun. I remember yelling, "No," like they do in movies. I remember the blood, the gunshot, and me running away. Gerald died today, and I have the feeling that he will not be the last. I do not know what is going on anymore. The hallucinations are gone for now, but I still cannot quite grasp what Gerald was telling me what is even real anymore. Is there really something racing towards Earth? The television shows nothing but static anymore, or my imagining things I feel like a pawn. But whose game are we playing? September 14th, 2322 AD. It is becoming increasingly difficult to write in here, though those two burden me immensely through every hour that I fail to catch sleep, not just because my dreams haunt me and break me through they make me watch. It is because I've been crying tonight, endlessly and almost violently. I witnessed my best friend's death. No, his murder, and I cannot deal with it. What brought him to do that? And why will these tears not stop? Are these tears through the constant damaging of my notebook being used to stop me from writing? Am I becoming as paranoid as Gerald? Do I really believe that there's something controlling us? I am fully aware that these are the words of a shaken, sleep-deprived, and traumatized man, but I still cannot bring myself to rip them out. Of this book, it is 3:15 a.m., and I'm afraid to close my eyes. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I do partially recall a dream I had. While some parts are vivid, others seem to have been oddly blurred out. Is there no place that I'm safe? My dream began with me standing in the middle of a field surrounded by a tall brick wall. A few meters away from me, it was night, but I could see no stars. I took a few uneasy steps when the wall started shifting. Bricks were constantly being added on top. while others were removed just as fast. It was not long before holes began to appear on the wall, though places where the bricks were disappearing too quickly to be replaced at first. I could see nothing but darkness through these holes. But then I began to notice the blackness. There was something out there removing those bricks and destroying my walls. A creature so very dark that it stood out like the brightest star in this otherwise starless night. I felt fear like never before as I slowly began to define its shape. Long, elongated arms made their way through and reached for me before scratching the walls in frustrated rage as I backed away again and again, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, the limbs pulled back, and for a few heartbeats, everything was quiet again. The wall had stopped shifting as a prelude of something much, much worse. Something out there outside of this little bit of shelter was roaring, if it could even be called that. It placed two hands on the sides of the holes and started pushing. Long, bone-like fingers grabbed onto the wall, which was now clearly cracking. Its hands pushed the bricks out of the way as if it were simple specks of dust. It was only then that I finally got to see its face, greeting me with a terrifying smile that would be it a psychopath. It opened its mouth to reveal the void within, and I recall thinking that I should recognize that face before it all went black. And I woke up sweating and out of breath. I had woken up to laughter of several tall, shadow-like figures standing around my bed. I tried to scream, but they just kept staring. I tried to open my eyes, but nothing was changing. That's when it all became a blur. I remember wondering why they were not moving, but I woke up sitting outside on my balcony. My legs were hurting and the pain quickly urged me to stand up somehow. I'd been sitting in the lotus position, which I had not been able to do since I was 14 or so. Are there any words for my confusion? Am I really still sane? I forced myself to eat something, but practically had to force the omelet down my throat. The dream still spooked me, and I felt like my mind had finally been damaged beyond repair. My continuing headache only served to reinforce that statement and was as if lightning split my forehead, as if my head was desperately trying to adopt my newfound madness. Although one thing was crystal clear, I could not let it consume me. The visions, the dreams, the disappearances. Gerald's suicide, all of it, had started with the discovery of Der Havard's God, not to mention the discoveries that Gerald's team had made, or had they just been crazy talk? I had to connect the dots. There had to be some sort of reasoning behind all of this. Reluctantly, I decided to go back to the research facility to gather more information, all the while wondering why I was not more shocked by everything that had happened. I just felt numb. Arriving at the facility was no boon for my sanity either. Strangely enough, everyone was there again, and I was greeted by one very excited researcher, Dr. Stone, according to her name tag, who talked to me with seemingly limitless respect. She told me that Dr. Havard was looking for me, and other researchers gathered around as she was speaking. They all held their distance, and all of them, even ones I had worked with before, stared at me with reverence in their eyes. I felt confused and oddly self-conscious. Hey guys, I hope the research is still going strong, I said, and they seemed satisfied with that. I tried to shake off the weirdness as I made my way to Dr. Havard through the least busy hallways There were still 0 answers. Just 2 days ago, this place had been abandoned. I shivered as I knocked on H's door. "Steve, good to see you. Let me get you some tea." DeHard pulled back a seat for me and immediately put a hot cup of tea in my hands, perplexed as I was. I could not help but notice that he had put me in his own very comfortable desk chair, which had been specifically made to ease the strain on his aching back. Meanwhile, Dr. Havard sat on the ordinary office chair usually reserved for guests. I could see the reverence in his eyes as well. What was going on? It was a question I found myself asking all too much. These past few weeks, I had to try and get my answers. Why have I not heard from you? This place was abandoned just 2 days ago. He nodded thoughtfully. Yes. We were receiving our visions too. Our Lord really did make it all clear, didn't he? Our Lord? I asked him, shivers reaching down my spine. Yes, don't you? He smiled. Forgive me, our Lord already said that you might still be so much shaken and confused from your own revelations. We were not expecting you until tomorrow. You all had those visions too, those dreams? Everyone here had them. Well, I don't think they were exactly the same. I saw some very personal things, and I'm sure others did too. We rarely talk about them, but I feel that they contain the same message overall. He hesitated, and I looked as if he was trying to muster his courage. Was he afraid of me? Would you mind if I asked about your visions? What, my apologies? I never meant to offend you, he said quickly. It's just that well, you're his prophet, right? I was dazed. Why me? Why was that thing doing that to all of us? It explained the awe they regarded me with, but left me in the dark. Otherwise, suddenly my head seemed to split in half as I heard a deep, loud voice echoing through it, an imposing voice that could only be described as ancient. You finally come. There were times that I doubted if you'd make it, but you've arrived where you belong, the voice said, and I looked at Dr. H, who was looking ecstatic. You are to be commended. The other focused the brunt of his assault on you, but you didn't fall and you didn't break. I was wise to choose you as my prophet. This is unreal. I struggled to speak. What are you? I am God. Listen and heed my words. Prophet, there is a lot to explain. The room's pulse was a weight. Its whispers a truth that lingered in my destiny, a truth that followed me to the void. Story number 8, The Crimson Curse. The morning was too quiet. The air heavy with the scent of cut grass and something darker. I'd just finished mowing the lawn, sweat dripping, when I saw a crimson velvet envelope nestled in a crack in the earth, glowing with an eerie pinkish light. One morning, after mowing the lawn, I found a strange crimson velvet envelope between the cracks in the ground, surrounded by an eerie pink reddish glow. It pulsed like a heartbeat, pulling me closer, whispering my name. It was mesmerizing to look at. I felt drawn to it, almost like it was placed there on purpose for me to find. I'd spent my life chasing the supernatural, hungry for proof of what lay beyond heaven, hell, or something else. I always was a firm believer in the supernatural, but I never got a chance to experience it. This felt like my chance, my key to the unknown. I thought this might be a unique opportunity to see once and for all if there's something more to it. It wasn't just an envelope. The velvet shimmered, its edges stained dark like blood long dread. The envelope was sealed in blood. It was signed to you by an old demon. My fingers trembled as I touched it, a cold, vile energy seeping into my skin, both thrilling and wrong. This energy that started flowing through my body was something evil. I think that's how it felt at first, a strange sensation of the purest evil, indescribable in human words. It was as if the envelope knew me, had waited for me, its presence a call from something ancient, something that didn't belong in the daylight. I thought I could finally get the answers I have been searching for my whole life. I always thought about it, and my mind was provoked by this question, by this never-ending string of dark and twisted enigmas that have always filled my soul. My questions about the veil beyond human perception burned brighter, urging me forward. Fear mixed with hunger, my obsession with the unknown, purgatory, truths hidden from us, surged, drowning my caution. My mind, body, and spirit all became weakened by this amazing and crushing force that was coming from the envelope, so I gave into it. I let it take over. I didn't even try to fight it. The envelope's pull was a force I couldn't resist, weakening my spirit, promising answers greater than life itself. I wanted to know, no matter the cost. The seal bore tiny letters. Pour your own blood to open this letter. Right under the seal it said, pour your own blood over the seal to open this letter, written in minuscule letters. I bit my finger, blood dripping, and reality unraveled, time and all slipping away. I bit my finger and let the blood fall on the seal. I felt displaced, lost in time and space, forever. The flames weren't fire. The envelope ignited, pink flames licking my skin, not burning, but pulling me into another plane, a pain deeper than flesh. I signed the paper. With my blood, it caught fire, its pinkish flame slowly engulfing me. I screamed in pain, but not because I was burning. It was a pain coming from the fact that I was being slowly taken to another plane bit by bit. I faded to black. I was aware, going trapped in an infinite glass tube, black smoke swirling, unharming but oppressive. When I opened my eyes a large glass tube was all that I saw. The tube seemed infinite, and the black smoke that filled it was not damaging me physically. Faces pressed against the glass, twisted, their acid-dripping teeth and claws clawing to reach me, their hunger a palpable force. When that cleared, I saw twisted faces of evil beings, their shiny teeth bleeding acid spit on the GL tube. They were everywhere. Their sharp claws were scratching at the surface, trying to break in and feed. The tube was a prison. Time dissolved. Darkness absolute. The creature's howls a chorus of ravenous need. I don't know how much time I spent inside that tube. Time seemingly wasn't a thing. Inside it, it was just endless, infinite darkness all around me. I passed out, their eyes burning in my mind. I woke in a dim room, a flickering bulb, casting shadows, a red velvet chair before me, echoing the envelope's eerie sheen. Coming back to my senses, I found myself in a small room. Although it was dimly lit by a flickering yellow light bulb, it was very dark. Right in front of me, there was a chair. It was wrapped in the exact same red velvet that the envelope was made of. A voice, deep and ancient, shook the room. "Please, sit down. Please, sit down," the baritone voice said, making the room tremble as if the eons the pithy past suddenly had a voice. The air was thick, also heavy, with dread. I felt fear licking my brain, and its awful embrace kept me in place, rendering me unable to move. The fear that built up inside me was life-threatening. I knew fear could kill, and this was close. My heart pounded, my body frozen. The room quaked, and I sat, the voice's weight pinning me. The room started shaking, and I sat down on the chair. It told me to close my eyes, red flashes dancing behind my lids. The voice told me to close my eyes in the darkness behind my eyelids. Red flashes started running before them. A door opened and closed, though none existed before. I heard a door opening, then closing shut. There wasn't any door when I first came here. This place defied reality, its laws alien, unnatural. Yet again, I was absolutely positive that the natural laws, the ones we guided our lives after, did not work here. More so, this wasn't anything natural. The fiend emerged. I opened my eyes, and a shadow stood before me, its red eyes searing, splitting my soul. "Open your eyes," the same voice once again told me. A wave of shock and pierced through my heart. It split my soul into halves, never to be repaired again. A fiend-like shadow, its eyes burning a bright red hue, fixated me. It was impossible to look at, yet here I was. It knew me from before my birth, its sad smile revealing gleaming teeth, heavy with timeless grief. The monstrosity stood before me, as if it knew me from my childhood, even from before I was born. The smoky shadow let out of the thin old smile revealed its shiny teeth. Its sadness was a wasteland, barren under dark clouds. The way its face contorted into something that revealed the dark, endless, and timeless sadness hit me so hard. The first thing that came to mind, the way I could picture this sadness that I was seeing, was a barren wasteland with dark clouds in the sky. It spoke of the hollow. "Don't be scared, child," it said, its voice weary, not cruel. "Don't be scared, child. I will not hurt you." "I hope," the demon fiend said. My mind buzzed, fear like static. I stood, aghast, static, buzzing through my skull. It chose me for my hunger for the supernatural, its final host before it ended itself. "You will be the last one for me, the last human I will possess. Before I end myself, I can't take it anymore. I choose you because you always wanted to see something that pertains to the supernatural." The hollow, it said, was its birthplace, a void that twisted purity into hunger. The demon said, "I just want to talk to you about the hollow before I leave you. The hollow is where I was born. It is where my kind comes from. I was not always a demon, you know. I was something else, something pure. But the hollow changes you. It twists you into something else, something that craves pain and fear." The hollow was a prison, a space between worlds, not hell, but close, where the broken were forged. It is a place of endless darkness, no light, no hope, just an eternal hunger that eats at you until you are nothing but a shell. It had possessed countless souls, each time harder, and it was done. I have lived there for eons, watching your kind grow and multiply, and I have possessed many before you. Each time it gets harder to leave, to go back to the hollow. It is a prison, and I'm tired of it. It offered me life. Unlike others who went mad, I am tired of the cycle of taking and destroying. I want to be free, so I will give you this one chance to live where others did not. You will carry me for a little while, and then I will be gone forever. I'd see the hollow, feel its weight, but survive. You will see things you were never meant to see, feel things you were never meant to feel, but you will survive it, I promise. Its touch was agony. Its smoky form solidified. Its hand searing my chest, tearing my heart. The demon reached out, its smoky form coalescing into something more solid. Its hand touched my chest, and I felt a searing pain like my heart was being ripped apart. I saw the hollow, gray ash, twisted shapes, eyes watching, hungry. My vision blurred, and I saw at the hollow a vast, endless expanse of gray ash and twisted shapes, shadows moving in the distance, their forms unrecognizable but filled with despair. I saw eyes in the darkness, thousands of them, watching me, judging me. The demon settled in me, cold and heavy, whispering of the hollow's horrors. I was back in my body, gasping on the floor of my home. The envelope was gone, burned to ash, but I could feel it inside me, the demon. It was there, curled up in my chest, heavy and cold set. It stayed briefly, then left. One night, my chest burning as it lifted. It was true to its word, though it didn't stay long. One night, I woke up choking, my chest burning like fire. I felt it leave like a weight lifting, but it left a shard of the hollow, a darkness in my soul. It left something behind, a piece of the hollow, a shard of that endless darkness. I see it in dreams, ash, eyes, hunger. I see it sometimes in my dreams, the gray ash, the eyes, the hunger. I survived, but I'm not whole. I know I survived, but I'm not the same. I carry the hollow with me now, and I don't know if I'll ever be free of it. The demon called me lucky, but I feel cursed, touched by something forbidden. The demon said I was lucky, but I don't feel lucky. I feel like I've seen too much, like I've been touched by something that should never have been. The hollow is real, a truth I can't escape. I just know that the hollow is real, and it's waiting out there for all of us. My home is no longer mine, corners too dark, air too still. I avoid mirrors, fearing what might stare back, a reflection not my own. The envelope's ashes are gone, but its mark lingers, a whisper of the void that waits beyond our world. I wanted answers, but found only fear, a piece of the hollow lodged in me, forever changing who I am. The world feels thinner now, as if the veil could tear at any moment, and I know the hollow is watching, waiting for us all. Story number 9. The bunker beneath the woods. The forest promised solitude, but it hid a secret that wanted me. I found it by accident, really just a rusted hatch, half buried under a pile of leaves and dirt in the middle of nowhere, miles from any town. I'd come to the woods to escape a brutal year. I was hiking through the woods about 20 miles from the nearest town looking for some solitude. The hatch gleamed under the leaves, old and forgotten, like a scar in the earth. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that now, but curiosity is a powerful thing. Something about it called to me, stronger than fear, pulling me toward the unknown. The darkness swallowed me whole. I brushed away the debris and tugged at the handle, revealing a ladder into a black void. I didn't have a flashlight, but my phone's light would have to do. The air below was heavy, damp, like stepping into a tomb. I climbed down. The air was thick, damp, and pressed against my skin. The ladder creaked under my weight, leading to a concrete hallway, its walls slick with stains, water, rust, or something worse. My heart pounded, urging me to turn back, but my feet moved forward, drawn deeper into the earth. The bunker was a relic of dread. The hallway opened into a larger room, a bunker by the looks of it. Shelves held cans of food, their labels faded. A cot sagged in the corner, and a table was strewn with papers. There were shelves stocked with canned food, long expired, a cot in one corner. A small TV flickered on the wall, its static buzzing like a living thing. A small TV screen mounted on the wall, it was flickering, showing static. The air felt wrong, heavy with secrets that clung to the walls like damp rot. The screen showed a family, but not alive. Every now and then an image would flash, something grainy like old security footage. A man, a woman, and 2 children sat at a table, the man talking, smiling, while the others sat frozen, lifeless. I stepped closer and saw it was a family, a man, a woman, and 2 kids sitting at a table eating dinner. Their stillness wasn't human, it was wrong, like puppets abandoned by their strings. The footage was looping the same few seconds over and over. The man's smile twisted, his eyes too bright, as if he knew I was watching. Something watched me back. I tore my eyes away from the screen and noticed the papers on the table, yellowed notes, scrawled in frantic handwriting. They were handwritten notes yellowed with age. The words spoke of a man named Daniel, trapped in this bunker, writing of a red sky and trembling earth. I picked one up. It was dated March 15th, 2020, from someone named Daniel Vance. He wrote of trumpets, a sound that haunted the night, and a presence that wasn't his family. He wrote about a lockdown, not the kind you'd expect, but something darker, something waiting outside. The notes grew more desperate. He said they had to stay in the bunker until it was safe, until the trumpet stopped. Daniel described his wife, Sarah, and children, Emily and Jacob. Their silence growing unnatural, their eyes fixed on the walls. He wrote about his family, his wife, Sarah, and their kids, Emily and Jacob. They stopped eating, stopped speaking, just stared, as if something else had taken them. He wrote about hearing whispers at night, voices that didn't belong to any of them. The air in the bunker thickened, a low hum vibrating through my chest, matching the note's warnings. I looked at the TV again. The footage had changed. Now only Daniel sat at the table, his smile forced, his eyes tiled. It was still the same family, but now the man Daniel, I assumed, was alone at the table. The others were gone. A shadow flickered behind him, tall, thin, with too many arms, its presence chilling the room. For a split second, I saw something else. A shadow behind him, tall and thin with too many arms. My stomach twisted, my instincts screaming to flee, but the hallway had changed. Narrower, darker, trapping me. I found a door, heavy and metal. I found another door at the end of the room, heavy and metal, with a small window. Through it, a room with a crimson velvet chair sat alone, its fabric unnervingly vibrant. I looked through it and saw another room, this one with a single chair in the center. The cold bit at my skin, my breath fogging, as if the room itself was alive. The room was cold, so cold, my breath fogged in front of me. Something moved behind me, a scraping, like claws on stint, pushing me forward. I stepped inside, the door vanishing behind me. I turned to leave, but the door was gone, just a blank wall where it had been. Panic clawed at my chest, the hum now a roar, shaking the walls. I started pounding on the wall, screaming for help, but the sound was swallowed by the hum. I tripped over a journal on the floor, Daniel's last words scrawled inside. It was a journal, Daniel's journal. The last entry was dated April 10th, 20. They're not my family anymore. It's outside, waiting. He wrote, "They're not my family anymore," and described a thing with red eyes. The shadow appeared. I looked at the chair again and saw it the shadow from the footage, tall, thin, with too many arms. Its red eyes burned, unblinking, filling the room with dread. Its eyes glowing red like embers in the dark. It didn't move, it just watched me. It spoke, its voice grinding like stone. "You found us. You'll stay. You found us," it said. "You shouldn't have come here." I tried to scream, but the hum drowned me, time twisting until I blacked out. I woke outside, the hatch sealed above. I woke up outside the bunker, the hatch closed above me. My phone was dead, my arms scratched with burning red lines, but my phone was dead. My clothes were torn, and there were scratches on my arms. The forest was silent, but it felt alive, watching. I hiked back to town, didn't tell anyone what happened. No one would believe me, and no record of the Vance family existed. I still hear the hum sometimes at night calling me back. I don't sleep, afraid I'll wake in that bunker with the shadow waiting.